The man had always believed that a quiet life was the closest thing to peace. He lived in a small rural town tucked between endless fields and rolling hills, a place where days passed slowly and the most exciting event might be the distant whistle of a passing train. For 5 years, he had existed here like a shadow among the living, working as a handyman for small jobs, helping mend fences, fixing creaky doors, or repairing broken windows. People knew him well enough to greet him politely, yet not well enough to question who he was or where he came from. He preferred it that way because the truth was, he did not know much about himself either. His memories before arriving in this town were foggy, as though his mind had erased everything that mattered. He remembered waking up one day in a bus stop far from any familiar place, with nothing more than a name written on a worn-out ID card and a few scattered images of a different life that faded the moment he tried to focus. Doctors once called it trauma-induced amnesia, but he never returned for treatment. Instead, he chose to move forward quietly, letting the past remain buried. Every evening, as routine and comfort, he walked along the narrow road that stretched past an old cemetery. The place did not frighten him, nor did it intrigue him. It simply existed as part of his path, a silent reminder that life was temporary, and most people were eventually forgotten. The cemetery was small, with crooked headstones, dry grass, and a rusted iron gate that groaned when pushed. It looked abandoned most days, except when families occasionally visited with flowers and sorrow. One evening, though, something changed. He noticed fresh soil where there had been none before. A grave newly dug, its mound still loose and dark against the pale surroundings. He paused, curiosity overtaking him for the first time in years. The wooden marker stood clean and newly carved, unlike the other weathered stones. A soft breeze brushed against him as he stepped closer, expecting to read the name of some stranger, someone from the town who had passed recently. But what he saw froze every breath inside him. His name, carved clearly into the wood. His exact birth date written just below it. The only difference between the grave and his living self was the death date left blank, waiting, as if someone anticipated filling it soon. The world tilted beneath him, anxiety clawing its way into his chest. He stared in disbelief, reading the name again and again, hoping the darkness tricked him. But each glance confirmed the same terrifying truth. Someone had made a grave for him, not a symbolic gesture, but an actual burial site prepared and ready. Fear surged through him like ice. He stumbled backward, feeling as if the earth had betrayed him. His heart hammered against his ribs, and his mind filled with possibilities he wished he could dismiss. Perhaps this was a prank. Maybe someone shared his name. But the more he thought, the more those comforting assumptions faded. The name was uncommon, his birth date an impossible coincidence. He left quickly, but the grave followed him in his thoughts. Every step home felt heavier than the last. By the time he reached his small house on the edge of town, he felt as though someone had ripped a hole through the quiet life he had built. He sat awake for hours, staring at his hands, trying to remember anything that could explain why someone would prepare a place for him to die. Sleep rarely visited him that night. He lay awake listening for every creak, every shift of the wind, every sign that he was not alone. Morning brought no comfort. The sun only revealed how unraveled he felt. He avoided people that day, unable to mask the fear that played across his face. In the days that followed, panic transformed into obsession. He returned to the cemetery repeatedly, hoping the grave had vanished overnight like a nightmare dissolving in daylight. But it remained exactly as he had found it, a silent reminder of a truth he could not understand. He searched for answers. He asked the cemetery caretaker, who simply shrugged, insisting no burial had been scheduled and that he knew nothing of the grave's appearance. He tried asking locals if they'd noticed anything strange, but everyone seemed confused, unaware such a grave existed at all. Night brought sinister signs that someone was watching him. The crunch of footsteps near his house, a shadow lingering too long in peripheral vision. And then, one morning, he found a photograph slipped under his front door, a picture of himself lying still on the ground, eyes closed, positioned as if inside a coffin. His heart dropped into a dark well of terror, Whoever had prepared that grave was now letting him know that death was not a matter of if, but when. His memories, once lost, now tormented him with fragments. Faces without names. A flash of gunfire. A voice calling out urgently. A chase. And then nothing. He began searching through the few belongings he had carried from the day he arrived in town. Under hidden layers of folded clothes, he found something he had forgotten existed: a small, weathered envelope. Inside were documents that revealed a past he had never fully understood. His name was real, but the life tied to that name was far more dangerous than the simple existence he now lived. He had once been part of a covert task force investigating a powerful criminal organization known for eliminating anyone who threatened their empire. His role involved gathering evidence that could dismantle them entirely. The documents detailed how he had been targeted, how there had been attempts to kill him, and how he had barely survived the last one. Someone had risked everything to save him, placing him into witness protection under a new identity. But somewhere along the way he had lost his memory. The trauma of escaping death had erased his past, leaving him unaware of the danger still stalking him. The newly dug grave made one thing clear: the criminals had found him again. Paranoia now controlled his every move. He noticed markings in the dirt outside his window, as if someone stood there late at night watching. Lights flickered unexpectedly. At times, a figure in black appeared at the edge of the road, never close enough to confront, but always close enough to warn. Fear finally shifted into determination when he recognized the face of the figure one night. It was a face from one of those memory fragments: a former partner he thought had died in the chaos years ago. Someone he once trusted, someone he had cared about deeply. But the eyes he remembered once held loyalty, now twisted with vengeance and betrayal. The truth was worse than he imagined. His former partner had survived, but instead of seeking justice, had been corrupted by the very organization they had fought against. That partner now wanted revenge, not just for survival, but because his escape had left others behind, including the partner who believed he had abandoned them. The grave was not a threat, it was a promise. The confrontation came like a storm. The shadowy figure stepped out from the hiding places of the night, no longer content with silent intimidation. The man felt fear racing through his blood, but he no longer ran. He had discovered his identity again, and with it came a fierce will to live. The battle was not with fists or weapons alone, but with truth. The partner confronted him with accusations, blaming him for a past gone wrong. Yet, in the heat of conflict, truths spilled like broken secrets. The man had not chosen abandonment. He had nearly died. Everything he had lost, including memory, home, and the person he once trusted, had been the price of survival. The authorities, alerted by his desperate calls for help earlier, arrived just in time. The corrupted partner was captured. The organization's presence in the region was exposed once more. The man who had lost himself now stood firmly in the identity he reclaimed, no longer a nameless stranger hiding from shadows. When dawn rose, it cast pale light over the cemetery again. The grave remained, but no longer as a threat written in wood and waiting soil. Instead, it marked the death of silence, the burial of fear, the end of a forgotten life and the beginning of a new one lived with purpose and truth. He stood before the grave one last time, no longer trembling. He understood now that the grave was meant to erase him. Instead, it awakened him. He turned away from the cemetery and walked toward the town, his home. His future ready to build a life no longer defined by fear, but by the strength that comes from surviving death and choosing to live anyway.